Yeah. Look.
What's up, Marcus Knight? What's going on, man?
Nothing, man. Just feeling excited to be here.
Yeah, I love the transition from like totally organic conversation to like now we're recording. What's
Yeah.
gonna happen, man? Well, hey, before we get into anything, just for the sense of that there are viewers, that there are people that will listen to this. Um, give a quick heads up on you, man, because you're doing some cool stuff.
Marcus Knights, he, him pronouns, from Chicago originally, living in Seattle. Go to market leader. So I help build organizations, scale organizations, revenue. I'd say 10 to about 50 million is like my sweet spot. Done that with several companies over. I like being just an operator in that standpoint, and just, overall just being someone that just likes to connect with humans. So I guess that's pretty much what I can say about myself in a short stint.
That's an amazing synopsis. I cannot do that as succinctly. But like you're also, I mean, it's funny. We're constantly asked to like reduce ourselves into something quippy that people can process. But like you and I were introduced through friends, and then you were like an interim CEO for another company. Like, how does one get to the point of like elite that you're just asked to like take the reins of a company because you can just hop in and out of it? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah. So backstory is I was able to consult for the company years ago. So I had a lot of like institutional knowledge of how they operated. And so when the CEO decided to go on sabbatical and they were short staffed, he just figured that I would be the next viable person that could step up. And he's like, hey, just don't burn the company down. All you got to do is just keep it afloat. You're good. He's like, you understand where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do. And so from my standpoint, it was just more or less all about like, what levers can I pull to get productivity to a level that was going to be, deemed successful for when he got back. And so far, so good.
It's a pretty humble way of putting it. I just happen to know the thing. So he said, don't burn the company down. Like, yeah, okay. That's pretty legit though, man. I mean, like what are your biggest, like what makes you most nervous going into a situation like that? Because that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I think that really, so I have what I thought I had a lot of knowledge of the organization, but what I didn't have a lot of knowledge of was the people inside the organization. And people, there are different ticks that people have. And so understanding what's going to make someone tick, or what are they most passionate about, and how to get the most productivity out of them in this short amount of time when they know that I'm only here for a short amount of time, I think was really interesting and eye-opening for me. I'd say that for the first month, I really spun my wheels quite a bit. Like, the organization was operating okay, and like, so nothing was broken or nothing like that. But I really had to spend more time with individuals to understand why they were passionate or why they wanted to do things a certain way. And it didn't really take me till about month 2.5 or so when I really started to get some major traction.
And do you find that to be pretty similar across organization?
It's yes and no. Like, it depends on the organization. It depends on the leadership within the organization and the receptiveness to change. This is an organization that wasn't very receptive to very many changes. And so because of that, I had to do things incrementally. Like, hey, I'm not going to change everything overnight right now, but we're going to start with like little pieces, little bite-sized crumbs that will lead us to the thing.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, man, reflecting on my little bit of experience and history in this, I think that's the only way to do it. Like, you can't just jump in and change everything overnight. Like, you're gonna run into a lot of roadblocks. Like, do you have like techniques or like tricks that you follow, like tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's come from a lot of like learnings or failures, if you will. Like, I think that's where it comes from. Like, oh, I could have done things differently in the past, and so now I try to bring that forward with me every company I go to. And again, like, I think the tips that I pretty much have are involve the people early on to bring them along for the journey. That, and it sounds cliche. I think it's one of those things that I think we all understand, but I don't think that we do it very well in practice. And for instance, like when I started at this company, like I pretty much just started to go because I saw all the changes that needed to happen. And I'm like, all right, let's just make them all right away. And then when I realized I was getting all of this friction, then I had to take a step back and say, okay, let me more so worry about the people side of things. And so if you can allow people to kind of come along the journey with you and like make them think it's almost their idea for some of the change, they're more bought in and they're willing to do the things a lot faster. So that's my number one thing, is like making sure that people feel bought in and that it's almost like their idea.
Yeah. No, it's a great idea. I think one of the big things that I've found over my career is that like finding like purpose,
Yeah.
giving people shared purpose. And it's almost the same thing, right? It's like, you don't have to convince somebody that like your idea was like convince them of your idea. It's just like get people aligned on like a shared destination.
Mhm.
And at least like if you're working towards the same thing and you align on that, then it's half your job's done.
Yeah, and that is the other piece, is that the organization as a whole, they weren't sharing the common goal, right? Like so that was another piece that it took me a while to figure out, that you all aren't on the same goal that you should be. So let's just set up the framework, and then let's talk about how we're going to get there.
Dude, okay, this reminds me. So this thing that I'm trying out as we like raise money and everything like that comes from this book that I just revisited. It came out in like 2015 or something. 0 to 1. Did you ever read 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel?
I haven't read it, but great author though, by the way.
Yeah, it's a good book. And the dude, listen, you can say whatever you want about the guy. I think he's pretty polarizing, but he's polarizing in a lot of senses because he's just very abrupt about some of his analysis. Anyways, he asked this question in his book. And it's like what he believes that like organizational secrets, great products, great chances for innovation lie in these gaps that people are unwilling to vocalize, right? Where they just like the secrets that they hold. And so he like formed this way of bringing that out, which is what, and he asked kind of the reader is, what is a contrarian belief that you have that most people would disagree with?
That is good. A
contrarian belief that you hold that you don't think most people would agree with.
Ooh, I have to give this some thought. Like I don't even know. Like,
But here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to expect. I'm a bet you on this, right? Because like I've asked this to a fair number of people relatively recently, and some people, like some of my friends, and I think this is why we're friends, go into these like deep philosophical moments when they're talking about theories of existence, and I'm like, cool, man, you're doing some deep thinking at night. And I have my own on that, but then like at an organizational level, it hit home for me because I've just casually studied behavioral science and innovation. And if you look at like the greats like Clayton Christensen and like Tversky and Kahneman and behavioral economics and all these fun things, it's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to suss out that like unspoken imperfect solution that everybody does. And that's where you find the innovation. And it's like, dude, I started looking at it from our perspective, relating it back to what you're saying. I was like, man, I think on the product side, on the technology side, it's that I think things need to be messy. Like, I think that processes and workflow needs to be a little bit messy. And I think that there's this really seductive lie that people in organizations tell. And that's that there's like one process, one solution, one straight line that fixes everything. And when you look at it like, okay, so for example, and this is, again, you don't have to agree with me because I think this is contrarian, right? Like, I think workflow and collaboration is like Gideon's knot. It's unsolvable, untiable, whatever you would say. And so in this space, especially like where we are with productivity, it's like, oh man, if only I had Notion or Coda or Google Docs or ClickUp or this. And it's like, no, they all do the same thing. They just do it in a different wrapper. And they all claim to be solving everything. But the truth is, you use one thing, I use another. That's how it's going to be. So anyway, so I'm wondering, like, on organizational processes with that, as you think about yours. Go ahead.
So first, like what you just mentioned, you call that's your contrarian statement. I agree with that. Like I think that it needs to be messy. Like from my standpoint, we get too rigid in like our roles, responsibilities within an organization that we lose kind of the creativity and like the flow of everything too. So from my standpoint, like workflow is it depending on what you're selling, what you're building, etc. Workflow is not going to be a bucketed type thing. Like it is a complete mess, and it's a like a beautiful chaos, if you will, in my opinion. So I agree with you from that standpoint, because if you try to just keep it into like it's just this one thing and you have to do it this way, it's never going to really be like how you went off camera there. Nice.
Yeah.
But as far as like my country,
work.
Yeah, right. Love it. It's just life. That's life of an entrepreneur right there. I guess my contrarian statement would be, let me see. I think that sometimes we get too caught up in everyone's opinions and everyone's like feelings, if you will, when it comes to getting things done. And not to say that like people don't need to be heard. I do think that people need to be heard and all that good stuff. But from my standpoint, I'm like, what is the meta? Like, what are we actually talking about here? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? And we get so caught into the minutia of things that we seriously spend time and spin wheels for a long period of time. And oftentimes it's just like, man, we could have completed this weeks ago if we didn't, get everyone's input from this. So
yeah, dude, I think you're exactly right. I mean, this is kind of what we were talking on our last chat about like my obsession with postmodernism, and tearing down the roots of postmodernism. It was funny. It was like yesterday. I'm trying to use Twitter, X more, whatever, because the entire technology ecosystem is on there. But I tweeted yesterday this thing that I've always held, which are these like false equivocations that we constantly make, that I getting back into your process. We waste so much time in the deliberation between these spaces. Our big one for like every day is that busy doesn't equal productive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the most common paradox that has ruined so many organizations, and really is the great myth of collaboration tools. In productivity, because it's like, oh man, we're measuring, like people are on them all the time. It's like, that doesn't mean they're working better.
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't, right? Like it's not. And it's like, it's literally the like selfish, self-annihilating form that like I think is very toxic in venture investments, because they prioritize point solution platforms that suck up as much time as possible. So by doing this for their investment, they are actually detracting away from workload and workflow, right? Like it's for productivity, which is the irony. But the other ones are like my favorite, and this is an Indiana Jones reference, by the way, if you ever watched the Indiana Jones, but it was fact and truth are not the same. Fact does not equal truth.
Yeah.
And there's so many other versions of that. But I think to your point is like, when we get lost in this space where words stop having meaning, right? And we start deliberating the fluff around why we're doing it instead of what we're doing, it just takes away from the organization, right? It takes away from the job. It takes away from anything, man. Like if you and I got lost on who we are, qualifying whether or not we could have our conversation together, like, oh man, you're from Chicago, I got a Yankees hat on. I don't think this is gonna work. It's like, no, man, like the best overlap or the best conversations happen at the overlap of disparate things, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I completely agree with that. I mean, one, how are you going to have the proper dialogue and actually get to a goal without that? So you have to really like, I try to take like self and people out of the equation as much as possible, and talk and think about like, what is our common purpose or common goal that we're aiming towards? Because we may have different ways to go about it, but we still may have the overall end goal in mind.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Like, it's funny is like having these conversations, Marcus. I have such high-minded and lofty like just esoteric goals for every day, right? For even like founding the business, because it's like rooted in a really deep understanding that I think only operators understand.
Yeah.
Truly, I can tell you're an operator. I can tell you have like rolled up your sleeves and worked all angles of a problem in an organization to get it done, because you just speak like it, it's like, that it's like, yeah, you don't just start off a nifty strategy and a good Gantt chart. Like the Gantt chart doesn't get shit done. Right. It doesn't. Right. It doesn't. Like people get things done, and you get things done by getting people to do the things. And it's like, I don't know, man. It seems, do you think that we're overcomplicating things too often?
A lot of times, honestly, that's how I feel, is that we do overcomplicate things a lot, just because it's like, if you just keep it to the simplest form of whatever we're trying to do and just make sure that we're executing on whatever that is, you're good. Yeah. Like everything else will come, like the success that you want with it, whatever, all of those things are the effect of doing the right thing. And so, but it's also what you start like realizing is that people also have ulterior motives, and they aren't being truthful, so that's the other piece of it.
Dude, my Sean, who I don't know if you met Sean yet on my team, but he's awesome. He's heading up all of our product. He's brilliant. He's worked in massive organizations over his career, but he brought up to me, I think before Christmas, what was that book? The like rules of power, the 48 rules of power or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, man, it's amazing to think that there are so many people out here, whether you recognize it or not, are taking this book to heart and are like, and it's true. It's like very Machiavellian, right? Yeah. It's like the whole Machiavelli thing. And I'm just like, yeah, man, there's a lot of people out there with ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly to your point. And you have to recognize that like every system is going to have those players. And you gotta, I don't know, man. How do you deal with that when you find somebody with an ulterior motive in a team? Like, what do you do?
I mean, it depends on where they're at within the team and what is it, and if we can get to the root cause of like their ulterior motives as well. Like, so for me, a big thing is I kind of turn into a question monger like all the time. I'm just curious and just like, hey, why do you do this? Why? Just why? Turn into a 2-year-old. Just why? And then I'll get to the answer. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get it now. But for me, it's like, okay, is the ulterior motive something that we're willing to live with and it's going to help us in some way? Great, because if so, then we can keep moving in a direction. Is it something that's actually going to be more detrimental to the org and to whatever we're building? If so, then we got to probably part ways with a person. But my understanding is just like, I try to get an understanding of what the ulterior motive is and why. Like if I can get those two things, and it takes time, no one's going to be forthcoming with that information. So it may take me a longer amount of time. Just, well, again, when you talk about like wasting time, like it may take me a longer approach to get there, but I'm trying to really understand, is it something that will be of benefit or is it something that's going to be of harm?
That's fair. I think, dude, you pointed out one of the most important distinctions that honestly took me a long time to realize, just like bootstrapping my first company and making all the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about like separating the difference between how you manage your personal relationships and how you manage your work relationships.
Yeah.
Because like in my personal relationships, if I were to find somebody that has an ulterior motive, which I have many times, right? Yeah. And listen, let's be honest, maybe I've been that dude a couple of times.
Yeah.
All right. Let's be fair about this. Mm-hmm. And But when it's happened to me, and I've found that I have always, since I was younger, like tried to play real cool and just been like, you know what, I'm gonna remove myself from that type of drama. Like
Mhm.
I don't. It happened relatively recently with my fiance and some people in her life that met somebody from my life that I didn't have anything to do with anymore. And
Mhm.
like this got brought up and they're like, oh, and started to talk about it. I was like, hey, let me head this off.
Mhm.
I don't want to be brought up in conversations. I don't want this because I removed myself from it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I don't want that drama.
Yeah.
That's it. Now at work, I think it's a totally different thing because you have a goal.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, we are aligned to build something, to make money, to build a product. People's livelihoods are at stake. Like we have to root this out. And if you are bringing these, if someone is bringing these, I don't know, I guess ulterior motives, like you have to find a way and you have to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like you really have to just understand what is it around though too. Like, like is like I've been a part professionally, I've been a part of organizations where ulterior motives were to try to get me ousted from the company because they wanted my role and things of that nature. And you're like, oh, this is interesting. And to your example of the personal side, I actually did just that. I kept it real cool and pretended like I didn't really know much about it. Like I just wanted to remove myself from that situation, but I'm still the leader of the organization. So I had to really just pretend like I didn't really know what was going on. But by me doing that, what helped out was I was able to get why they thought the way that they thought. Like I got a lot of insight by just being ignorant.
Yeah.
And it actually helped out because what ended up happening is they ended up shooting themselves in the foot and ended up, like having to leave the company abruptly and everything else. And I was cool. Like if it would have worked out, more power to them because they accomplished what they wanted to. But by me not reacting and just really taking my time to understand what their motives were, it worked out in my favor.
That's cool, man. Like I had it blow up. Really blow up in my favor. Like I had it work out and then kind of blow up in the long term because I got involved with like a volunteer organization years ago. And so when I was, had my firm and was doing that, I was just doing some volunteering. And it was cool. The head of the thing, brought me in. So it was like I got to work with one of my buddies and some people that I really know and respected, a former ambassador actually for the US. And we're in it and we were doing this initiative. And there was this other dude who was like my age, who was, from the area. And he was like vying for a job because there were some big wigs that were on the board and doing this thing. And like out of nowhere, I started noticing all this like weird political stuff and all this like side talk, right? And I just played it cool. And the interesting part was I was like, listen, my friend started this. It's a volunteer organization. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to do my job.
Yeah.
But what happened was this person that I deeply respect, super accomplished, had brought in the guy who had all the political machinations in his heart. And he ended up just being so full of shit that it blew up in his face. And the lady had taken sides with him and like had like done this thing and tried to do this weird political stuff. And she was forced by the people who founded this, by an ambassador, to apologize to me publicly. And I didn't ask for that, but they thought it was the right thing. And so now to this day, this person is involved with a lot of people I respect, and I respect the hell out of her. But because of this awkward situation, I was like, she kind of got embarrassed. And I'm like, dude, I literally did nothing in that circumstance.
You were just living.
I'm just living. And this weird toxic dude who I think has like totally, flushed himself out of the world.
Yeah.
Just screwed up. And I'm sitting there and it was more of a lesson in like, you can't help what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
but managing this and being proactive is like, I think it's the important part about building an organization with people like you're talking about, where it's like, you got to be aligned, got to work towards it. And you got to have a leader that's in place to do that, man. So, I mean, it's refreshing to hear that you're a leader and you're doing that. Do you find it hard to balance that in your personal life?
Oh man, absolutely. Like, yeah, man. I think that because of all of the pressures that you deal with from in work, it's like, how do you like when work is over, I'm trying to figure out how to turn it off, like how to like really just shut it down for a while. But you can't, like, you still got family, you got things that you need to do. What I think that has been great is that my family's given me just a whole bunch of grace. Is like, yeah, you have a demanding role. And so when you're home, when you're here and present with us, like, yeah, just be present with us and like, let that stuff go. And then they also know that like, if there are any ulterior motives out, like from people or friends or whoever, acquaintances, whatever, like in the personal aspect, they're like, yeah, Marcus isn't going to go for any of that. Like, they're very quick to like, just shut it off. Like, you don't want to, I wouldn't go down that route with him if I were you, you know?
What do you like? What do you prefer more? Right. Cause like, we're both in situations where we're like, we have to lead organizations and we have to represent that. Like me, I'm subservient to like the money right now. So I have to like go after, sell myself to the money. And I'm sure like you in your roles and like where you're going and like shopping around to get that position and boards and everything, like, how do you, I don't know, man, how do you feel about approaching people and being approached? Do you like it when people are more candid with you and just like very direct, or do you like to be kind of massaged and sold?
No, I like direct. Like I'm a straight shooter. Like, I really want, like, if you could tell me directly what you want, like, I can then connect the dots on if I'm able to help you or not or whatever. Like, but if we have to do this whole song and dance and you're kind of massaging around it and etc., I get lost. I'm like, hey, I don't have that much time, so just get right there.
So let me make this personal then. How do you feel doing business in Seattle? In the Northwest, man, because I feel like, listen, this is not meant to put you on the spot, but I'm a Northwesterner. I'm from Portland.
Yeah.
And I noticed that people are much more passive aggressive in the Northwest.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And it can make it really hard to navigate, especially for people that are from big cities, more on the East Coast, that are much more direct.
Yeah. Yeah.
How has that worked out? Like, how do you find that?
I am, like, again, I am 100% a direct person. It rubs people the wrong way sometimes, and I understand that. And so, depending on who I'm speaking with, I can tone it down a bit. But like when they're talking to me, I'm asking for directness. I'm like, hey, just be as direct as possible. You know, whatever. I know that my style to them may not work, so I can massage that a little bit. But I just don't want it to come off as disingenuous. So I'm always like, hey, just so you know, we're gonna get to the point. Like, we're gonna get there. I think the Pacific Northwest is just a very interesting area because you're right, it's very passive aggressive. Like, it's something that is just a cultural shock for me. You know, like, I'm like, oh, I'm just used to people just telling you exactly what it is and take it or leave it. Like, so, but I think that here in Seattle, like, I do have a lot of good connections, and I've made some really good friends and acquaintances and building up my network, just because sometimes it can be a breath of fresh air getting that directness. And some people are looking for that. They're like, hey, we know where we stand in your eyes. And so for better or worse, they know that I'm not just blowing smoke, you know. So that's been cool.
Yeah, I think it's funny, man. Like, I was up in Seattle fairly recently and working with people, and there is, I think, you know, Seattle has its things. What do they call it? The Seattle freeze. Like, if you're not from there, and being a Portlandian, I just Seattle, you know, whatever. But I think that you can find good pockets, and especially in big cities, you know, it's like, it's the dynamic that's always the stereotype that people fit into, and there's always exceptions. Like, New York was my favorite when I went to school there and worked there a little bit, because it was like, oh man, I always hear New Yorkers are so rude, they're so this, that, and the other, and I'm like, actually, I'm gonna tell you something. There's some of the nicest people on the planet.
Agree,
but they just don't dilly dally. Like, who put it really well? Somebody put it really well, that it was like, yeah, like you're walking your bags and it breaks at the bottom of the stop at the subway stop. They're gonna pick that up, help you up the stairs, and then leave. They're not gonna talk to you about your baby. They're not gonna talk to you about this, and they're just gonna do it. And I was like, yeah. And I've been there. Like I've been there and like totally lost or like without money for the subway, and somebody's just like, here's a buck, just move. And I'm like, thank you and fuck you too. Like
right. They just want the efficiency. Just keep it moving. Like just keep going. No small talk needed. I love that.
See, I and that's where it's like with the business and like building a business is I waffle. Do I want that, or do I want the like really nice place where everybody's being happy?
Me personally, I like the just directness. Like I really do, because again, know where I stand, know what people are wanting to get out of the outcomes, and like either I have something that they want right now, or I can build to what they want if that's the direction in which we're going, or it's just like, or it's just not going to be a fit and I need to move on. It's a big, it's a big arena if you, and so there's a whole lot of players in there. So if you're not the right person, maybe the person next to you is, so.
Yeah. Dude, that's, I think that's a good point. I don't know. So I'm curious, man, cause you're seeing this at high levels, especially within business. Like, how do you like our market, the tech industry, everything is going through this like period of like uncertainty. It feels like, and I think there's way too many factors to really list off, but I think it's, COVID and like the hangover from COVID and the weird shit that we all kind of adjusted to in COVID.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about it yesterday of just feeling like people forgot how to interact with other people.
Yeah.
During it, like there was like a reset in like basic, just how to react. And then like the market thing with the SVB, freaking investors out, and like people reacting again very emotionally and not seeing it as like a natural market behavior after this. Then the election, like, what do you think is going on, man? Tell me like a groundhog, tell me, prognosticate, man. Tell me if we're going to see a shadow or sunshine right now.
I think it's going to get better in tech. I do. I think that it's going to take time, though. I think we're probably a year, 15 months, something like that, before we're really going to like get out of this funk, just for all the reasons you mentioned, from the hangover of COVID, still the, just the tech industry, just with the layoffs, et cetera. Also the election year. I think that there's just so many things that are factoring into this. And so people are freaking out right now. Like, yeah, let's just wait till all the dust settles. There'll be some, I think from now until 15 months from now, there'll be some incremental changes for the best, for better. I also think there's going to be some changes for the worse as well. But I think that it will be in the clear. I want to say in about 15 months or so. Ask me in 15 months if we're there. It's going to be a great follow-up. I swear.
I need to share with you a couple of blog posts I did at the beginning of COVID. Yeah. It was like, I think we're super prescient, right? And we're super like, hey, things disrupt us. Yeah. We will get through this. Yeah. Here's what's going to happen. It's going to go like, boom, 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 and then even out eventually, but it's going to feel like your heart, your stomach's in your head. Oh, man. Okay. Well, give me some expert advice, though, because you're like, where you're transitioning to is really like CRO role. Tell me about that, and tell me about that in industries, because I'm like, I want to know if I need one.
Yeah. Well, I think that a CRO, depending on where stage that the organization is much needed. But one, just to help set the right foundation and strategy for the organization. How are we going to get revenue? I think that from COVID to present day, it's changed so drastically, though, and it will continue to evolve and change with quote unquote AI, with all these other things that are in the mix of it. I think that what you'll see is the organizations that will start to get more revenue are going to use AI for augmenting the sales force. Like I really do believe that's a direction in which we're going, and the organizations that are adopting that now and like adopting that model will see success. I think that other organizations who are going to be later to adopt, they'll get there eventually, but they're going to go through more constraints and more challenges before they're there. And ultimately, like the CRO role, I think that that's a role that's going to require more use of data and AI as well to kind of predict more trends.
That's what I was going to ask. Are there specific parts of that revenue and sales part that you think are going to be most disrupted or most important to focus on?
I think the lead gen motion right now is going through a huge transformation.
It is. What are you? No, okay, yeah, like it is. What do you think is going on?
So I guess I'll start with what I'm seeing, and then like I don't know if I know for sure, but I have some assumptions. Like what I'm seeing is that the traditional ways of cold calling and LinkedIn messaging and emailing isn't resonating the way that it once was. That's fine. I mean, stale. We've been doing it for years now, right? So that makes sense. I think that with more video, there'll be some success there. I think that there is a way in which that we haven't even thought of yet, really, that lead gen will really start to pick back up. And I just think it has to do something with how we consume information today. Very bite-sized, very like it has to be quick to the point some way, somehow. Don't know what that apparatus is, but I just know that the ways that we've been doing business before COVID just aren't working. And so, yeah.
So this is making me think of something I kind of stored in the back of my mind. And it was a couple of weeks back, somebody talking about the sales, like kind of direct sales, direct marketing process. And it was effectively that the top of the funnel is becoming more and more important, actually, than the incremental changes that are happening in the bottom portions of the funnel. Because, I mean, listen, at some point, there's a finite amount of data that we put out into the internet on ourselves and our organization.
Yeah.
Right? And you can peel a apple or something. What's the expression? You can peel an apple 100 ways, something like that, right? Yeah. But it's interesting that top of funnel now and like the relationship and the content that you put out becomes more and more important.
And to that, I think that we're going to see more relationship sales for top of funnel, meaning that like I think channel partnerships are going to be massive in this new wave, more so than before. And I think that it's going to be about how you're building these relationships that are really going to have to help top of funnel, because right now everything else that I'm seeing just isn't resonating the way that it once was.
Okay. So here's my grand prediction. I want you to tell me I'm so wrong on. I think software specifically is going through its CPG moment.
Ooh.
Yeah. So hear me out, right? Because I'm an idiot. I don't know this market as much as you, but so bear with me as I try to explain your industry to you, right? It's okay. I'm one of my talents is pattern recognition. It's always been one of my things, right? I'm into it in that way, whatever, but I like pattern recognition. It's what makes me good at math while simultaneously being very bad at like the algorithmic side. But regardless, in my pattern recognition, what I'm seeing is an overlap where we had like industries like CPG, which full disclosure, I've come from, so I'm biased, have ubiquity to them, right? Because they're widgets, right? They're like cost efficiencies, COGS built into distribution channels and channel partners. And I think that what we're seeing now in the software space is that ubiquity, right? They have saturated the market and now have so specialized themselves in such small changes that it's now like a marketplace for these SaaS tools will be very important. and the channel partners from which you associate are going to be more and more important, because the way that we're marketing these products are going to be more decided less on pure functionality, which there's no moat anymore. Now they're part of it. Like, is it a running shoe? Is it B2B sales CRM software, right? And you'll have those aspects, but soon enough, it's going to be a matter more of preference and association top of funnel than it is going to be about pure functionality, because that functionality moat is going to disappear.
That's pretty interesting. And I think that you're spot on.
Well, thank you, but you can't just tell me I'm right. You have to give me a response.
No, yeah. No, we're good. We can hang this whole thing up. You're good. We solved it. No, I think that you're right. Like, functionality is something that, like, it's a preference, if you will, and preference for whatever reason that, the organization may need. So that's one aspect. But being able to build something based off relationships, based off of like knowing that we have a common need of something, and there are people that can help you kind of like get there and kind of like uncover why this is the thing that's going to work best for you, I think is great. I think that, yeah, that works out just fine. It's still going to be very like, well, yes, you're right. And also I'm curious to see what other things could challenge that notion though. Like, okay. Who knows? Yeah. I'm thinking about, like, wheels are turning in my head. So yeah.
Well, dude, it's funny. I made the mistake of downloading a new book to listen to called The Singularity. And hold on, let me pull this up to make sure I have the author's name correct. It is The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, Kurzwell.
Okay. They have a movie, it looks like.
Do they? Well, there's like a Johnny Depp movie from way back in the day. But look, this book is awesome. This guy, has predicted a lot of what's happening about 10, 15 years ago, whatever, when he was doing it, looking at really at artificial intelligence and how it evolves and the pace of technology. But seeing how correct he is, and then hearing his predictions for the future and the fair near future is overwhelming. Don't listen to it before bed if you have any type of anxiety like I do, because you won't sleep. You'll just be sitting up. But I think, to your point, is like it really lands on, like, he has very clear, distinct predictions based on metrics and a lot of smart, scientific minds. But I think at the end, it says a lot of what you're talking about, which is there's different paths that this can go. We're totally uncertain, but the changes that are occurring will occur, and they will create changes that we can't necessarily even conceive at this point. And I just, the problem with this, man, is my whole problem with the AI sphere, even with my level of familiarity in it, is it totally erases from the table comprehension and like, and people's comprehension. And it's like, I can automate every task in the book, but what happens to my own comprehension and involvement within the system?
And that's the thing, when people are relying on quote unquote AI to think for them, or like that's scary. It's like I like to use AI in a way that's like, help me with these mundane tasks that I just don't feel like doing, and it provide me a framework. I still need to come in with my knowledge and expertise and fill out that framework that's going to best be the most beneficial for whatever organization I'm a part of. But people are just blindly like, hey, write this business plan, and this is what we're moving forward with, is this business plan. It's like, is that really gonna work out?
Well, there's also like the more basic parts of it is like, okay, so let's talk about the sales process.
Yeah.
Like automated scripting, automated video, realistic video generation and content creation, automated distribution, automated optimization, right? Automated conversion to the person. Great. You've automated this system theoretically, right? If the computing power wasn't insanely expensive, and that's why Sam Altman's raising $7 trillion right now, right?
Right.
I should tell people something. But the other part of that is I can automate the other side. And I don't think that, like, so many people are caught up in generative AI. How do I push things out? Yeah. Not a lot of them are concentrating on like edge case. They're not concentrated on actual ML and like other types of models that are more ingestive, right? It's like, I can do the same thing. If you're pushing something at me automatically, it's dependent on my consumption.
Ooh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So can't we automate the consumption portion to like take all those things and then weed them out? And then we just have a really weird cycle of
that's interesting. Like, no, you bring up a really interesting point. Like we can automate the other side so that the response doesn't even come from us. Number one, like,
yeah,
like that's one aspect of it. Like responses don't come from us. And so now there's just this loop that humans are now on the outside of this whole engagement, and generative AI, ML, whatever is just doing this loop back and forth.
Is this not the like most depressing version of Skynet that we can think of? Is like Skynet and the Matrix are actually just like a DMV office for AI that has to constantly interact with each other?
Jesus, that's crazy. That's a crazy thought right there.
Dude, but for real, like imagine you start like self-filtering as a revenue leader, right? Who's trying to sell. Let's say let's get to consumer because we can do the same thing for business, but like, let's say you're selling a consumer product.
Yeah.
And your entire sales funnel and your entire manufacturing funnel is automated to just push out to people. But it has to target them in the real world. They still have to make a purchasing decision.
Right.
And you as a consumer, if you know everything is just automated, like what do you like? Don't you just start filtering it out and saying, nah?
I think you have to. Like, honestly, I think that, after a while you're like, hey, this is just noise, and I don't need to be a part of this noise. Like if I feel like purchasing something as a consumer, I can do my research and go purchase something. Like what's that stat from years ago that, consumers are X% more educated on the product that they're trying to buy because they've done all the research, et cetera. Like, yeah, like, so I don't need someone trying to tell me what I need, right? Like, so if I can then filter that out as a consumer, and then when I'm ready, or like a year or two, or whenever the time is right, I've now done the research to go buy whatever it is that I quote unquote need.
Yeah, and that's my point about comprehension, right? Is like, maybe I'm dumb, all right, to this, but like I'm not gonna automate my purchasing.
No.
Or consumption. Like I'm not gonna give up that level of like autonomy that comes from like, do I want toilet paper today? Like, are you just going to order it automatically? Like, no, man, like maybe I want to see options. Like that's human.
Yeah.
It's a very human thing.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I think that it's one of those things that we're going to see. Like, I'm curious as to how many individuals, how many humans are just going to let this automation like kind of run their lives, if you will. Like I'm very curious from that standpoint, because I've talked to some people that are like, I use AI for everything. I have a book my travel and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but you don't want any part of that process. Like you don't want to have the light bulb go off in your head. Like I planned this amazing trip. Like I did the cool thing, and I get the reward on seeing my friend's face when we're at the place. It's like, yeah, I did that, not ChatGPT.
Yeah, but that's it, man. Like, it's Idiocracy, right? It's that movie.
Yeah. Oh, geez, don't get me started yet. Yeah.
But yeah, and hey, man, like maybe I'm talking us through a loop that's already been discussed 1,000 times, but like, okay, Business travel. All right, I got to go to San Francisco for a couple of days to make meetings. Can you book my trip and my this?
Mhm.
It's not an interesting trip, but it also deprives me of one. It deprives me of the individual choice, right?
Yeah.
Which is what makes us human.
Yeah.
Number two, it also, I mean, it deprives us of the randomness. It deprives us of that, like that little bit of chaos that allows us to enjoy those decisions. Like, okay, let's say it's a business trip. You plan your trip, and then it's going to plan where you're going to eat. It's going to plan what you're going to see. Is like, why not just watch a video?
Right. Yeah. And from that standpoint, like, who's to say that you don't change your mind on what you want to see or eat or whatever during that process? Like, so that's the other piece of it.
Yeah, and then aren't you subject to like the thing that we all actually hate, which is like, great, where should I eat? Oh, I'm going to go on to, whatever review site. And then you're like, we all know that you can't trust those review sites.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same as like Amazon reviews. You got to go to the 1 stars and filter out to see what's a bot and what's not. And it's like,
yep.
You gotta, I don't know, man. You gotta have that individual choice. And maybe I'll stall.
No, I think that you're onto something. Like the comprehension piece is big, man. Like that's one thing that I think that if we don't get this under control, it can be very scary. Like people are seriously just not thinking and just allowing decisions to be made on their behalf. And again, maybe when I think about some examples, there could be some extreme cases or like some extreme cases of like just following the list that the AI made for you, and it leads you into a bad decision too. It's like if you don't think about like, oh yeah, well, it gave me this option. I actually don't like that option though. Like you got to have some of that comprehension in there to say like yes or no to whatever it is that it's providing.
Yeah, I don't know about you, man, and maybe we're our own little echo chamber here, but
could be.
I am very adverse to the idea of somebody knowing my next move.
Yeah.
Like I'm cool with being transparent, but I don't like listen, if I see an ad that's so spot on and something I just talked about, I will purposely not buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Because or find it from another company. Cause I'm like, listen, you're spying on me.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like that. That's very invasive kind of things. And I don't know, man. It's very interesting. But until then, by the way, you should listen to the singularity thing real quick.
I am. I seriously wrote it down right as soon as you said it. So
it's good. The narrator's voice is takes a second to get used to, but then he's a pretty good reader. But one of the aspects that I did find very interesting, because it goes on that like exponential growth curve that becomes almost indistinguishable from a straight line in our technological progress, like crazy, cool, overwhelming sense of where technology is going to go very soon by his prediction. But one of the aspects that he's very hard pressed on that I think most people in the AI game of whether humans get left behind and whatnot ignore is the innovation to how humans adapt to it. So like the Neuralink thing, but it really gets into like nanotechnology and that world that seems like it's Iron Man, like with the suit. And but it gets into that about how we're going to like be able to modify ourselves to where we can process and experience things at the same pace at which AI is able to process, because we're going to be we're going to be like blending our biological and our digital selves. I can't explain it. Read the book. It's much better at explaining it, man.
Yeah, no, it sounds interesting. So I definitely am going to read the book.
Yeah. So okay, so we're reaching the end of our hour. I expect you got a ton of meetings to get on to, but okay, I'm going to leave it at this, man, because we're going to have another one of these discussions.
Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Okay. One, you have to get back to me if you had any thought on that other belief, that deeper belief, that contrarian belief.
Yeah. I need to come back to that for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Number two, I want to know, like, where do you think, like, especially with startups, like, we'll just leave it at this. You can have like one last comment. Like, where do you think the technology business and particularly your industry with like being a CRO, being in that world, like what do you think the biggest trends are? Where do you think it's going?
Biggest trends from the CRO standpoint or just in technology in general?
Yeah, I think from a CRO standpoint, like within an organization.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think that from a CRO standpoint, tech companies need to learn how to be more are going to have to learn how to be more efficient. Just from a standpoint of like, we've operated a certain way for so long, and the sales motion, in my opinion, has operated in one kind of motion for far too long, from a standpoint that typically too many people, not enough of the right type of output. And so when we can free up with tech, et cetera, we can free up some of those things. The organization as a whole can get to the outcomes faster with a leaner group, but a more like efficient, leaner, and like highly focused group. Like that's what I see as like the next iteration of like the sales function. Tech, I think it's just going to be one of those things that I think that we will need to see a little bit more time to really understand how it's all going to play out. But like I mentioned before, I think it is going to plateau at some point, probably looking at within the next 12, 15 months. But overall, the sales org is going to go through another radical shift, I believe, in that time period, to understand what is a necessity versus what is fluff or waste. And in my opinion, I think that we've over-indexed historically to people. And I don't think that we need as many people in the sales org now. That goes from anywhere from seed to, IPO. I really believe that like you can get by with less if you just focus on the output and the efficiency piece.
Okay, this was going to be my last question, which is, as a in between pre-seed and seed stage company, right? Effectively B2B SaaS, right? Some enterprise, some direct. What would you prioritize for every day? Like from the CRO standpoint, what would you prioritize for us?
Partnerships right away.
Okay.
B2B partnerships right away, because I think that you all will get the traction that you need faster with B2B partners.
We're going to talk more about that offline, my man. Marcus, you are my favorite guest. Seriously, we've had like 3 of these conversations to get to this recording, and each one of them has been an hour long. And I can see why organizations love you so much, and why they're lucky to have you, man. Regardless, let's touch base offline here in the next couple of days anyways, and we'll talk about some next steps. But I owe you an email. You owe me an email.
Yes. Hey, thanks for having me, for real. And I can't wait to do it again, because I have to come back and answer those questions that you asked me, the contrary questions, for sure.
I like it, man. All right, Marcus, I'll talk to you later.
Hey, take it easy.